In the isolated Appalachian foothills of 1880's Pinewood Springs, a mixed heritage nurse was about to face her greatest challenge. What started as routine herb gathering took a shocking turn when she came face to face with contaminated waters. Claiming lives across two communities, Clara Whitman wasn't your typical frontier healer. For years, she had spent her life caught between two worlds, trained in Western medicine, yet inheriting her Cherokee mother's traditional knowledge, known for treatments that worked when others failed. When she encountered the mysterious illness, spreading through both the White Town and Cherokee settlement, she had no idea she was walking into a battle against forces more dangerous than disease. Clara's determination to find the source would lead to a confrontation that would shake the foundations of power in the region. What began as a medical mystery would become a profound reckoning of identity and belonging. The divided communities would never be the same after the half-breed healer and Cherokee chief united to expose the poison flowing through shared waters and hearts. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Clara Whitman's fingers worked the dark soil with practiced precision, her movements deliberate as she transplanted the delicate yarrow seedlings. The early morning mist clung to the Appalachian foothills surrounding her small cabin, shrouding the world in grey uncertainty. Fitting, Clara thought, for a woman who belonged fully to neither world she inhabited. Her cabin stood precisely where it should, at the edge of Pinewood Springs, close enough to serve those who needed her, far enough to keep their judgment at arm's length. The townspeople's reluctant footsteps had worn a narrow path to her door. Over the years, their desperation temporarily overcoming their distrust of the half-breed healer. Clara brushed soil from her hands and studied the yarrow's feathery leaves with satisfaction. Her mother had taught her that yarrow stopped bleeding, fought fever and warded off infection. Dr. Hargrove called it savage superstition. Clara called it effective medicine, one of many remedies that existed in the narrow space between her father's Western medical training and her mother's Cherokee wisdom. "Miss Whitman?" The uncertain voice broke through her contemplation. Clara turned to see Sarah Miller clutching her 5-year-old son against her chest, his small face flushed with fever. The woman's eyes darted nervously, as though someone might witness her transgression. "Mrs. Miller." Clara kept her voice neutral, despite recognizing the woman who had crossed the street last week to avoid passing her. "What brings you here?" "It's Tommy. The fever won't break." Mrs. Miller's voice cracked. "Dr. Hargrove gave him medicine 3 days running, but he's getting worse. Please, I didn't know where else to go." Clara nodded once, brushing soil from her skirt. "Bring him inside." The cabin's interior was meticulously organized, with dried herbs hanging from the rafters and shelves lined with both glass medicine bottles and traditional clay pots. Mrs. Miller's eyes widened as she took in the strange amalgamation of Western science and Cherokee tradition. "Put him on the bed," Clara instructed, lighting an oil lamp. "How long has he had the fever?" 5 days now." Mrs. Miller laid Tommy on Clara's small cot. "Started with headaches, then the fever. Last night these marks appeared." She pulled back the boy's collar to reveal a distinctive rash spreading across his neck and chest. Clara's breath caught. The pattern was familiar, not from her training in Philadelphia, but from her mother's stories. The telltale sunburst pattern, the high fever resistant to normal treatments. When Clara was 11, her mother had described a similar outbreak that had claimed 12 lives in her grandmother's time. "Has he been near the river? The East Bend, where the mining company is working?" Clara asked, placing a hand on the boy's forehead. Mrs. Miller looked startled. "Yes, they were fishing there last week, but Dr. Hargrove said—" "I know what Dr. Hargrove said." Clara reached for her mortar and pestle. "But right now, the needs medicine that will work." Clara worked methodically, combining willow bark with echinacea and a specific mountain root her mother had shown her for treating waterborne illnesses. She added a small amount of laudanum from her medical supplies, measuring the tincture with precision. "This may taste bitter," she warned, lifting Tommy's head. Mrs. Miller stepped forward hesitantly. "Is that Indian medicine?" Clara met her gaze steadily. "It's medicine, Mrs. Miller. Part of it comes from my training at the Women's Medical College in Philadelphia. Part comes from my mother, who knew these mountains and their remedies better than anyone. Your son needs both." After administering the tincture, Clara soaked cloths in cool water, infused with mint, and placed them on Tommy's forehead and chest. As she worked, she hummed softly, a Cherokee healing song her mother had taught her, the melody as much a part of the treatment as the herbs themselves. Within an hour, Tommy's breathing had eased, and the angry red flush began to fade from his skin. "The fever's breaking," Mrs. Miller whispered, touching her son's cooler cheek in disbelief. Clara nodded, keeping her expression carefully neutral. Despite the familiar satisfaction of seeing a treatment work, "He'll need another dose in 4 hours, and one more tonight. I'll prepare them for you to take home." As Clara measured herbs into small paper packets, Mrs. Miller watched with newfound respect. "My husband can't know I came here," she admitted quietly. "He says decent folk shouldn't consort with—" She stopped herself. "With half-breeds." Clara finished matter-of-factly. "I understand, Mrs. Miller, but remember this moment the next time someone tells you where decent folks should seek healing." After Mrs. Miller left with her drowsy but improving son, Clara organized her supplies, noting which herbs needed replenishing. This wasn't the first case with these specific symptoms she'd seen this month. 3 others had appeared, all with the distinctive rash, all from families who had been near the eastern river bend. Her mother's voice seemed to whisper from memory. "When the water sickens, the people follow." The general store's bell jangled as Clara entered later that morning. Martha Caldwell looked up from behind the counter, her weathered face crinkling into a smile that defied the town's collective disapproval. "Clara, just in time. That shipment of iodine came in yesterday." Clara nodded gratefully. Martha was the only person in town who treated her normally, a friendship born years ago when Clara's mother had treated Martha's dying husband with dignity when others had abandoned him to his pain. "Thank you, Martha. I'll need more gauze as well, and whatever quinine you can spare." Martha raised an eyebrow as she gathered the supplies. "More sick folks coming your way?" 5 cases this week with the same unusual symptoms. I'm concerned." The door burst open, cutting off Clara's words. Dr. William Hargrove stood framed in the entrance, his imposing figure seeming to fill the small shop. His eyes found Clara immediately, narrowing with undisguised contempt. "Miss Whitman," he said, his voice carrying to ensure everyone in the store could hear, "I've just come from the Miller's home. Young Tommy seems remarkably improved. His mother claims it was rest and prayer, but we both know better, don't we?" Clara faced him calmly. "The boy needed treatment. I provided it." "You provided dangerous superstition," Hargrove countered, stepping closer. At 52, his carefully maintained appearance and Boston accent still commanded the deference of most townspeople. "These people don't understand the risks of your primitive methods." "My methods worked," Clara replied evenly, "and they're neither primitive nor dangerous. I've warned you before about practicing medicine without proper qualifications." "I have qualifications, Dr. Hargrove, from the Women's Medical College of Pennsylvania." "A school for lady nurses," he dismissed with a wave of his hand. "Combined with savage folklore, hardly equivalent to proper medical training." Martha stepped between them, her practical nature asserting itself. "That's enough, Doctor. Clara has as much right to purchase supplies as anyone." Hargrove's face reddened. "You enable her, Martha. One day someone will die from her concoctions, and there will be a reckoning." He turned back to Clara. "Stay away from my patients, Miss Whitman. Pinewood Springs has a qualified physician. It has no need for a half-breed witch doctor." The store fell silent as he stormed out. Clara finished gathering her supplies, her face betraying none of the familiar sting his words carried. "Don't let him trouble you," Martha said quietly, as she wrapped Clara's purchases. "Pride makes him cruel. He knows your treatments work." "That's precisely what troubles him," Clara replied, counting out coins from her small purse. As Clara left the store, a young Cherokee man approached, recognizing her immediately. "Miss Whitman?" His expression was grave. "I've been sent from the settlement. Our people are falling ill with a strange fever. The elders asked if you would come." Clara looked toward the distant mountains where the Cherokee settlement lay, then back toward Pinewood Springs. Always between, never belonging, but perhaps there was purpose in standing at the crossroads of two worlds. "Tell them I'll come tomorrow," she said, already mentally cataloguing the supplies she would need. The young man nodded gratefully, unaware that this simple request would set Clara on a path that would forever change her life, and the fate of two communities bound together by shared waters and divided by everything else. Dawn broke over the mountains as Clara secured her medical bag to the saddle. The morning air carried the scent of pine and the promise of late summer heat. She'd packed herbs from both her garden and the forest, along with the Western medicines she'd carefully accumulated, a bridging of worlds contained in a single leather satchel. "You're still determined to go, then?" It wasn't a question. Thomas Reed leaned against a tree at the edge of her property, his stance casual, but his eyes alert. At 30, he wore his mixed heritage in his features, Cherokee cheekbones and eyes set in a face that could sometimes pass for white, a fact that had given him access to spaces denied to others. "The settlement needs help," Clara replied, adjusting her hat against the sun. Thomas nodded, pushing himself away from the tree. "Then you'll need a guide. The main paths are watched since the mine expanded operations." They set off at a steady pace, following game trails that wound through dense forest rather than the more established routes. Thomas led with the quiet confidence of someone who'd spent his life navigating between worlds. "Heard you stood up to Hargrove again," he said, after they'd ridden in silence for nearly an hour. Clara's mouth tightened. "He'd rather see people suffer than admit my medicines work. And some folks would rather be right than helpful." Thomas glanced back with a hint of his wry smile. "Reminds me of when we were kids, those boys who pushed you into Willow Creek to wash off the savage, then got angry when you swam better than they could." The memory brought an unexpected smile to Clara's lips. "You jumped in after them and ducked them until they apologized." Thomas chuckled. "Not that it changed their minds." "Nothing ever does," Clara replied softly. They lapsed into the comfortable silence of old friends who shared wounds too deep to require constant acknowledgement. The settlement came into view by midday, a collection of cabins and traditional structures nestled against the protective embrace of the mountains. "The settlement has changed," Clara observed. More permanent structures had replaced the temporary dwellings she remembered from her childhood visits with her mother. "They're trying to establish permanence," Thomas explained. "After so many forced relocations, people need to believe this place might last." The settlement's activity came into focus as they approached, but it wasn't the normal bustle of daily life. People moved with urgency between dwellings, carrying water and herbs. The sounds of coughing and soft chanting carried on the air. "How many are sick?" Clara asked as they dismounted. 15 when I left yesterday. Probably more now." They were immediately approached by a young woman whose face showed signs of exhaustion. Thomas, "Thank the spirits. And you've brought her." She turned to Clara with undisguised hope. "Your mother helped my grandmother years ago. We need that wisdom now." Clara felt the familiar weight of expectation. "I'll do what I can." The first dwelling contained 3 patients, an elderly man and 2 children. Clara worked methodically, examining their symptoms while questioning the woman caring for them. The distinctive rash, the stubborn fever, the joint pain, identical to Tommy Miller's case. "The water," Clara said with certainty after examining the second dwelling. "Ask everyone when they began drinking from the eastern stream." As she treated the sick, Clara found herself automatically using gestures and words her mother had taught her, placing her hand just so on a feverish forehead, murmuring Cherokee words of healing as she administered medicines. Knowledge lived in her body even when her mind doubted its belonging. In the third dwelling, she encountered an elderly woman who watched her with piercing eyes. Unlike the others, this woman's gaze held no desperation, only evaluation. "You move like Nianoka," the woman said, using Clara's mother's Cherokee name. "But you fight yourself with every step." Clara looked up sharply. "You knew my mother." "I am Waya. Your mother and I learned healing together as girls." The old woman's eyes narrowed. "She said you would return someday, when both worlds needed you." Before Clara could respond, the dwelling's entrance darkened as a tall figure entered. The man's presence immediately commanded the small space, not just through his physical stature, but through the quiet authority he carried. His clothing blended traditional elements with practical modern adaptations, and though he couldn't have been more than a few years older than Clara, responsibility had etched itself into the lines around his eyes. "Grandmother, I came as soon as I heard you called for me." His voice was deep, his English flawless, but carrying the subtle cadence of Cherokee as his first language. "Nahele," Waya said, "meet Nianoka's daughter, the one I told you about." The man, Nahele, turned to Clara, reassessing her with newfound interest. "You're the healer from the White Town." "I'm a nurse," Clara corrected automatically. "She is more," Waya insisted, "though she denies half her gifts." Clara focused on mixing a tincture rather than responding to the uncomfortable accuracy of the old woman's assessment. "This fever responds to a combination of willow bark, echinacea, and the river root that grows near limestone. But the illness comes from the water. It's been contaminated." Nahele watched Clara's hands as she worked. "The mining operation upriver. Most likely." The symptoms match stories my mother told of a similar outbreak when the first white miners came to these mountains. Clara administered the medicine to Grandmother Waya, then moved to check on the other patients she'd treated earlier. Several showed improvement, though 2 of the most severely ill had weakened further despite her efforts. As she worked into the evening, Nahele remained close, observing her methods with intelligent interest. He helped without being asked, supporting patients as they drank medicines, bringing fresh water, asking relevant questions about treatments. "You were educated in white schools," Clara noted as they stepped outside between patients. Nahele nodded. "Government school first, then a missionary college." "Why?" "To understand the power that threatens us," he answered simply, "and to use that understanding to protect our people." "Is that why you came here? I'm told you're from Western Territories." "I came to unite scattered bands of our people. Now I see I've arrived in time for a crisis." He studied her face in the fading light. "You use both Cherokee wisdom and white medicine together without conflict. Few can stand in both worlds so effectively." Clara looked away. "I don't stand in either world completely. Perhaps that's your strength, not your weakness." He gestured toward the dwellings where her treatments had shown success. "Our medicine woman died last winter. The people need someone who understands both the old ways and the new threats." Clara realized where the conversation was heading. "You're asking me to stay here, to become your tribe's healer." I'm asking you to claim your mother's legacy, Naheli corrected, to help your people. These aren't my people, Clara said quietly. Not fully. I have patients in Pinewood Springs who rely on me. The same people who cross the street to avoid your shadow. Thomas's voice came from behind them. Clara turned. Some do, others need me. Consider my request, Naheli said. Your mother would be proud to see you become what you were born to be. The words followed Clara like shadows as she prepared to return to town the next morning, troubled by both the worsening illness and the unexpected offer that had awakened questions of belonging she'd spent years trying to bury. Clara returned to Pinewood Springs to find the town transformed. Drawn curtains and shuttered windows lined the main street, and the usual bustle had given way to an uneasy stillness. The faint smell of burning cedar and pine, fumigation attempts, hung in the air. She had barely unsaddled her horse when the first knock came at her door. Judith Barnes, wife of the freight company owner, stood on Clara's porch with her hand pressed against her teenage son's forehead. Dr. Hargrove gave him powders for 3 days, Mrs. Barnes whispered, glancing nervously over her shoulder. The fever's worse, and now the rash has appeared. By nightfall, Clara had received 7 more visitors, all arriving furtively, all bearing the same symptoms, all having first sought Dr. Hargrove's help without success. Clara treated them with the same mixture she'd used at the Cherokee settlement, modifying the dosages based on what she'd learned. Don't tell anyone you came to me, she instructed each patient, recognizing the hypocrisy but understanding the necessity. In crisis, pride surrendered to survival, but memory was short. Once healed, these same people would likely cross the street to avoid her again. Morning brought Martha Caldwell to Clara's door, her practical nature heightened by urgency. Edgar Thornton died at dawn, Martha announced without preamble. Dr. Hargrove was with him all night but couldn't save him. The Thorntons are demanding answers. Clara paused in grinding herbs. Edgar Thornton, the bank president, represented old money and older prejudices in Pinewood Springs. How many cases now? 28 that I know of. Hargrove's overwhelmed. Mayor Fletcher's called a town meeting for noon. Martha lowered her voice. You should come. People need to hear the truth about the water. The town hall was packed by midday, fear proving a more powerful motivator than the usual afternoon work. Clara slipped in quietly, taking a position near the back where she could observe without drawing immediate attention. Mayor Samuel Fletcher stood at the podium, his handsome features arranged in an expression of grave concern that didn't quite reach his calculating eyes. At 35, he'd already mastered the politician's art of appearing deeply moved while remaining utterly detached. Citizens of Pinewood Springs, Fletcher began, his voice carrying the refined accent of his Boston education. We face an unprecedented health emergency. I've asked Dr. Hargrove to address the situation. Hargrove stepped forward, his usual confidence noticeably diminished. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his hands trembled slightly as he gripped the podium. We are dealing with a virulent fever of unknown origin, he admitted. Standard treatments have proven challenging. Challenging? James Thornton rose from his seat, grief hardening into anger. My father is dead, Doctor. 4 others as well. Challenging seems inadequate. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Hargrove's face flushed. I assure you I'm employing every modern medical technique. Yet people keep dying, someone called out. Hargrove's composure fractured. The disease originates from the Cherokee settlement, he declared, his voice rising. These savage illnesses always spread from their camps. Their primitive living conditions and heathen practices breed contagion. That's not true. Clara couldn't remain silent any longer. Heads turned as she stood. The illness affects both communities equally. It comes from contaminated water, specifically the eastern river bend, where the mining company has been dumping waste. Fletcher's political instincts sharpened visibly. Miss Whitman, while we appreciate your folk knowledge, this is hardly the time for unsubstantiated accusations against the town's primary employer. My accusations are based on observation and evidence, Clara replied evenly. The pattern of infection follows the water usage. Those drinking from the eastern bend fall ill first and most severely. Are we to take the word of a half-breed over our town physician? Hargrove demanded, finding safer ground in familiar prejudice. Before Clara could respond, the town hall doors opened. Chief Nahaley entered, his commanding presence silencing the room instantly. Beside him walked a small Cherokee girl, perhaps 8 years old, her dark eyes wary and exhausted. I believe I can contribute to this discussion, Nahaley stated, into the stunned silence, since the illness affects both our communities. Fletcher recovered first, political calculation visible in his quick assessment of the situation. This is a town meeting, sir. Your presence is unexpected. As is a disease that doesn't respect artificial boundaries, Nahaley replied smoothly. I've come because we share a common threat, and perhaps a common solution. He nodded toward Clara. Miss Whitman's assessment of the water contamination matches our own findings. Hargrove stepped forward, indignation overriding caution. You have no place here. Your people brought this pestilence. My people are dying, Nahaley interrupted, his calm voice cutting through Hargrove's bluster. Including this child's parents. Emma has lost her family to the same illness claiming your citizens. The small girl pressed closer to Nahaley's side, her face expressionless, but her fingers, clutching his coat with desperate intensity. Clara recognized the careful blankness in the child's eyes, the same protective emptiness she had adopted after her own mother's death, when caught between worlds that each viewed her as other. What exactly are you proposing? Fletcher asked, sensing the room's shifting sympathies. Cooperation, Nahaley answered, and acknowledgement of the true cause. The mining waste has poisoned water used by both our communities. Fletcher's expression revealed his discomfort with this direct accusation against the town's economic foundation. These are serious allegations that require investigation. While you investigate, people die, Clara interjected. The treatment I've developed helps many, but not all. We need to stop the contamination at its source. Angry voices erupted from several mining company representatives present. The town meeting dissolved into factions, those demanding immediate action, those defending the mining operations, and those simply seeking someone to blame. In the chaos, Nahaley approached Clara, gently guiding Emma forward. She has no one left, he said quietly. She needs someone who understands both worlds. Clara looked down at the silent child, recognizing her own past reflected in those wary eyes. I'm hardly equipped to care for a child. You're exactly equipped, Nahaley countered. She's been exposed to the illness but shows no symptoms. Yet, you can monitor her health while giving her what she most needs, understanding of her position between worlds. Clara felt the weight of the request. Another responsibility. Another life intertwined with hers when she'd worked so hard to maintain her isolation. Yet she couldn't turn away from the child's silent need. What's your name? Clara asked, kneeling to the girl's level. The child remained silent, her dark eyes evaluating Clara with the wariness of someone who had learned trust, often led to disappointment. She hasn't spoken since her parents died, Nahaley explained softly. But her name is Emma. Clara held out her hand, not pushing, simply offering connection. "I lost my mother when I was not much older than you," she said gently. "It feels like being torn in half, doesn't it?" And something flickered in Emma's eyes, the faintest recognition of shared understanding. She didn't take Clara's hand, but she didn't pull further away either. "She can stay with me," Clara decided, rising to her feet as the town meeting continued to fracture around them, at least until better arrangements can be made. As they left the town hall, Clara felt the familiar sensation of standing between worlds, but now, with a small shadow walking silently beside her, another soul caught in the same painful divide, and an illness spreading through both communities that would require wisdom from each to overcome. 3 days after the town meeting, Clara led Emma along the forest path toward the Cherokee settlement. The girl had remained silent since coming into Clara's care, communicating only through nods, shakes of her head, and occasionally drawings that revealed both talent and trauma. "My mother brought me this way when I was a child," Clara said, not expecting a response, but sensing that her voice provided Emma some comfort. "She would point out plants and tell me their stories, how rabbits stole fire, how Grandmother Spider brought light." Emma's hand tightened slightly in Clara's, the first voluntary contact she had initiated. Ahead, the settlement came into view, noticeably quieter than during Clara's last visit. Death had cast its shadow here too. Grandmother Wire sat outside, her dwelling as if expecting them, her weathered face crinkled into a smile at the sight of Emma. "You've brought the silent one," she observed in Cherokee. "Good. Her spirit needs anchoring." Clara helped Emma settle on a blanket near the elder before explaining their presence. "The illness spreads in town just as it does here. I need to understand it better." Wire studied Clara's face. "Understanding lives in more than the mind, Nianoka's daughter. The answers you seek require both worlds of knowing." The old woman reached for a small drum and a pouch of herbs. "First, we help the child find her voice again." Emma watched warily as Wire arranged cedar, sage, and tobacco in a small clay bowl. The grandmother began a low, rhythmic chant while tapping the drum softly. Not the performance Clara remembered from tribal gatherings, but something more intimate, a gentle coaxing of spirit. "Close your eyes, little one," Wire instructed Emma in Cherokee, continuing when the child complied. "See your parents standing in the light. They are not suffering now. They walk with ancestors. Their love remains with you like the stars, visible, even when clouds pass." Clara translated quietly, watching Emma's face. A single tear tracked down the girl's cheek, the first emotional release Clara had witnessed. "Put your hand on the earth," Wire continued. "Feel how solid it remains even when storms come. Your grief is the storm. The earth remains." The ceremony continued with simple but profound gestures, connecting Emma to elements around her. Clara found herself participating almost unconsciously, remembering fragments of similar rituals from her childhood. When Wire finally fell silent, Emma opened her eyes. Looking directly at Clara, she whispered a single word in Cherokee: "Water." The adults exchanged surprised glances at this first utterance. "The water took them," Emma clarified, her voice rusty from disuse. "Yes," Clara confirmed gently. "The sickness came from the water." Wire nodded with satisfaction. "Now we can begin, little one. Go with Talisi." She gestured to a young woman nearby. "She will show you how to make cornbread while the healers talk." After Emma left, Wire's expression turned grave. "This sickness has visited our people before. When I was a child, my grandmother spoke of it. Before that, her grandmother's time. Always when the earth is wounded in certain places." "The mining," Clara confirmed. "Yes, but not all mining brings this shadow. Wire motioned for Clara to follow her inside the dwelling, where she retrieved a worn hide map marked with natural features. Only when they dig here. She pointed to specific locations. Clara studied the map, her mind connecting Cherokee knowledge with her Western training. These are limestone deposits. When disturbed, they could release minerals into the groundwater that, combined with mining waste. The poison becomes stronger, Wire finished. Like hateful words mixed with truth become more dangerous than lies alone. The elder withdrew a bundle of dried plants from a storage basket. These roots, gathered where water meets stone in shaded places, help fight the poison, but they grow scarce now. I'll need to find more, Clara said, already calculating required quantities as death tolls mounted in both communities. Nahele already leads hunting parties. Your Thomas guides them. Awaya smiled at Clara's surprise. We may be old-fashioned, but we don't wait for disaster to act. Outside, they found Nahele returning with several Cherokee men, and unexpectedly, 3 townsfolk, including Martha Caldwell's son. All carried bundles of plants. Martha organized helpers from town, Nahele explained, seeing Clara's questioning. Look, those whose families you've treated wanted to contribute. Martha herself had established a preparation area where Cherokee women and several townswomen worked side by side, cleaning and processing plants, according to Wire's instructions. Never thought I'd see the day, Martha commented as Clara approached. Mrs. Peterson there wouldn't let her children play with savages last month. Now she's learning Cherokee plant names faster than anyone. Clara watched the unlikely cooperation with cautious hope. Crisis either builds walls or bridges. Speaking of bridges, Martha lowered her voice, you're becoming quite the topic in town. Half the people say you're their salvation. The other half claim you've bewitched everyone into pagan practices. And Mayor Fletcher, waiting to see which way the wind blows stronger. Martha's practical assessment was cut short by a call for more baskets. As the day progressed, Clara worked alongside everyone, combining her pharmaceutical knowledge with traditional preparations. She noted how Emma gradually emerged from her shell, first watching the activities intently, then tentatively helping. A Cherokee girl sought berries. Later, Clara joined Nahele, checking water samples collected from various stream points. They worked in comfortable silence until he spoke. You move differently here than in town, he observed. More fluid. Clara looked up, surprised by his perception. I hadn't noticed. In town, you hold yourself like someone expecting a blow. He demonstrated, subtly tensing his shoulders and neck. Here, that armor loosens. Clara recognized the truth in his words. Old habits. In town, I represent both the savage they fear and the education they resent in a woman. And here I'm the white influence some distrust. She smiled faintly. Always half of something, never whole. Nahele shook his head. Not half of each, both complete. The simple reframing caught Clara off guard. Before she could respond, Thomas joined them, muddied from foraging but triumphant. Found a major growth of the river route 5 miles upstream, he announced, and something else, mining equipment. Moving toward the North Ridge, they're expanding operations. The implications were immediate and concerning. If they disrupt more limestone deposits, Clara began. The sickness will worsen, Nahele finished. We need to act quickly. As twilight approached, Clara prepared to return to town with Emma and their precious cargo of medicines. Grandmother Wire pulled her aside for a final word. Your mother had the same struggle, the elder said. Caught between knowing and believing, between seeing and understanding, she found her strength when she stopped fighting herself. How? Clara asked, the genuine question of a student rather than the defensive response she might have given days earlier. By accepting that some truths can't be measured or written in books. Wire pressed a small medicine pouch into Clara's hand. Your mind sees patterns in the sickness. Your spirit must see the pattern of your purpose. With Emma's small hand in hers and bundles of medicine secured to her horse, Clara rode toward Pinewood Springs, her mind working on both tracks, analyzing chemical properties of the medicinal plants while pondering Wyer's more mystical counsel. For the first time since her mother's death, Clara felt the boundaries between her two worlds softening, not into confusion, but into a more complex, integrated understanding. The same water flowed through both communities, carrying both healing and harm. Perhaps she too could be a channel for both forms of wisdom. Clara's cabin became a makeshift clinic in the days following her return from the Cherokee settlement. Word had spread about her successful treatments, and even those who had previously scorned her found themselves at her door, fear of the spreading illness temporarily overcoming prejudice. 3 more recovered overnight, Martha noted, helping. Clara prepared tinctures from the plants they'd gathered, including Judge Wilson's wife. That's turned some heads. Clara nodded, measuring doses with precision. The combined treatment, using both her pharmaceutical knowledge and grandmother, Wyer's traditional remedies, proved more effective than either approach alone. Lives were being saved, but the illness continued to spread as the contaminated water remained in use. "We need to address the source," Clara said, setting aside the last bottle. "These treatments help the infected, but more fall ill every day." That evening, Clara presented her findings at the hastily called town meeting. She'd spent hours preparing water samples, documenting cases, and mapping the spread of the illness in relation to water sources. "The evidence is clear," she explained, indicating the maps spread before the town council. "Those drinking from the eastern fork of the river are falling ill first and most severely. Chemical waste from the mining operation, when mixed with natural minerals in the limestone deposits, creates a compound that—" "This is preposterous," Edward Morrison, the mining company representative, interrupted. "Miss Whitman has no scientific credentials to make such accusations." "I've analyzed the water samples myself," Clara countered, her voice steady. "The contamination is undeniable." Dr. Hargrove rose, his face flushed with indignation and something else. Fear, Clara realized. Fear of her growing influence. The town council should be aware that Miss Whitman's treatments involve Cherokee rituals and unregulated herbal concoctions. She's exploiting this crisis to undermine modern medicine with savage superstition. "My treatments are saving lives," Clara responded, maintaining her composure, "which should be our primary concern." Mayor Fletcher watched the exchange with calculating eyes, weighing political consequences against mounting deaths. The mining company provided most of Pinewood Springs' employment and tax revenue, yet the death toll continued to rise. "What exactly are you proposing, Miss Whitman?" Fletcher asked finally. "The mining operation must redirect its waste away from the watershed, and the town needs to source its water from the western tributary until the eastern fork is clear." Morrison slammed his hand on the table. "This would cost thousands of dollars and weeks of lost production." "And how much does a human life cost, Mr. Morrison?" Clara asked quietly. The meeting dissolved into heated arguments, with the council ultimately postponing any decision, a political maneuver Clara recognized as effectively siding with the mining interests while appearing concerned about public health. As Clara left the town hall, exhaustion weighed heavily on her shoulders. For over a week, she had worked almost without rest, treating patients day and night. The political battle now looming would demand even more from her depleted reserves. She returned home to find Emma feverish and listless, her small body curled on the cot where Clara had left her in Martha's care. "It started an hour ago," Martha explained worriedly. "The fever came on suddenly and I noticed the rash beginning on her neck." cold dread seized Clara's heart. She had seen this pattern too many times now, the rapid onset, the distinctive rash. Emma had contracted the same illness that had claimed her parents. "I need to prepare the treatment," Clara said, fighting to keep her voice steady as she gathered her supplies with trembling hands. "Clara," Martha said gently, "you're exhausted. Let me help." Together they prepared the medicine, Clara measuring ingredients with desperate precision while Martha kept cool compresses on Emma's forehead. The child's dark eyes followed Clara's movements, filled with a knowledge beyond her years. She recognized this illness had taken her parents, and now threatened her too. "You won't leave," Emma whispered, her first full sentence since coming into Clara's care. Clara knelt beside her, brushing damp hair from the child's forehead. "I won't leave, I promise." For 3 days, Clara barely slept, monitoring Emma's condition and adjusting treatments as symptoms evolved. Between caring for Emma, she continued treating other patients, pushing herself beyond exhaustion. On the 4th morning, Clara opened her door to find Martha's general store vandalized, windows broken and Indian lovers painted across the storefront. "They came at dawn," Martha explained, her practical nature unshaken despite the damage. "Morrison's men, though no one will testify to it. They're trying to isolate your supporters." Later that day, as Clara delivered medicine to 3 households, she heard the whispers, "Cherokee witchcraft," and "savage sympathizer" followed her through town. Dr. Hargrove had been busy spreading his own version of events. Returning home, Clara found Nahele waiting outside her cabin with 3 Cherokee healers. "We heard about Emma," he explained, "and about the growing resistance to your work. We've come to help." The sight of Cherokee healers walking openly through town created immediate tension. By nightfall, a small crowd had gathered near Clara's cabin, their murmurs carrying accusations and threats. As darkness fell, an unexpected visitor arrived. Mayor Fletcher slipped through Clara's back door, his political smile replaced by genuine concern. "Morrison and his backers are organizing against you," he warned in hushed tones. "Hargrove is telling anyone who'll listen that you're poisoning patients with primitive potions." "Yet his patients die while mine recover," Clara replied too, exhausted for diplomacy. Fletcher's carefully maintained facade cracked slightly. "My sister's child recovered under your care. I haven't forgotten that." He hesitated. "But the mining company employs half the town. If they pull out, if they continue poisoning the water, there won't be a town left to employ," Clara countered. Fletcher studied her face. "You truly believe the mining waste is the cause?" "I know it is. I've tested the water myself." Something shifted in Fletcher's expression, ambition warring with conscience. "I need time to maneuver politically. Can you continue treating patients for now?" "As long as I'm standing," Clara promised, though she could feel her strength waning. After Fletcher left, Clara checked on Emma, whose fever had finally broken but left her dangerously weak. The Cherokee healers maintained a rotation of care, allowing Clara to treat other patients. By midnight, as Clara administered medicine to her 20th patient of the day, her vision began to blur. She reached for a bottle and missed. Her hand, trembling uncontrollably. "Clara!" Nahele's voice seemed to come from a great distance. "You need rest." "There are 3 more patients waiting," she argued, fighting to focus. "You cannot help them by destroying yourself." His hand on her arm was gentle but firm. Clara tried to stand and found her legs would no longer support her. The room tilted, alarmingly, as exhaustion finally claimed its due. The last thing she remembered was Nahele catching her as she fell, his strong arms lifting her as darkness closed in. "Emma," she whispered. "Is improving," came his reassuring voice. "Rest now. Let others carry this burden for a while." As consciousness slipped away, Clara surrendered to the inevitable for the first time since her mother's death, placing her trust completely in another's hands. Clara woke to sunlight streaming through her cabin window and the soft murmur of voices from the main room. For a moment, disorientation gripped her. She rarely slept past dawn. Then memory returned, her collapse from exhaustion after days without sleep. She rose carefully, surprised by her body's weakness, and moved to the doorway. The scene before her momentarily stole her breath. Nahele sat at her small table with Emma, patiently teaching the child to grind herbs in her mother's mortar. The morning light cast them in a warm glow as Emma's small hands mimicked his precise movements. "Like this?" Emma asked, her voice stronger than Clara had yet heard it. "Perfect," Nahele affirmed. "Your hands remember what your mother taught you, even if your mind doesn't recall." Clara must have made some sound, for both turned toward her simultaneously. Emma's face brightened with a smile that transformed her solemn features. "Clara, Chief Nahele showed me how to make medicine," she announced proudly. "We've been helping people while you slept." 2 days, Nahele explained, seeing Clara's confusion. "You needed the rest. The Cherokee healers and I have maintained your treatment schedules." The implications slowly registered. Nahele had essentially moved into her home, crossing boundaries that would scandalize Pinewood Springs. Yet in her absence, he had maintained her patient's care and clearly gained Emma's trust. "Thank you," she said simply, the words inadequate for the territory of gratitude she felt. A new routine emerged in the days that followed. Clara and Nahele worked together treating patients, their different approaches complementing each other. While Clara precisely measured pharmaceutical components, Nahele added traditional elements with equal care. Together they refined the treatment, improving its efficacy beyond what either could have achieved alone. Emma blossomed under their shared attention. The child who had arrived traumatized and silent now helped with simple tasks, her natural intelligence evident as she quickly learned both Western and Cherokee healing practices. "She has the gift," Nahele observed one evening as they watched Emma carefully sort herbs with intuitive precision. Clara nodded. "Like her parents before her." She had treated Emma's father once, years ago, and recognized the same careful focus in his daughter. Their days developed a rhythm, mornings treating patients together, afternoons spent with Emma while one of them visited those too ill to travel. Evenings brought quiet conversations by the fire, where professional respect gradually evolved into something deeper, though neither acknowledged it directly. On the 5th day, Thomas arrived with 2 leather satchels slung across his shoulder. "Evidence," he announced without preamble, spreading papers across Clara's table. "Mining company documents showing they knowingly dumped waste into the watershed, and water samples from 6 locations with complete chemical analysis from a laboratory in Charleston." Clara examined the papers, her training allowing her to interpret the scientific findings. "This proves the contamination beyond doubt. How did you get these?" Thomas's usual conflict-avoidant demeanor had hardened into resolution. "Some miners have family sick with the fever. One clerk in particular was willing to help after his daughter recovered under your care." This evidence created new momentum. Martha Caldwell, despite the vandalism of her store, organized a group of townspeople whose families had benefited from Clara's treatments. 26 families now publicly support you," Martha reported. "They're demanding the town council take action about the water." The mining company, sensing the shifting tide, sent a representative to Clara's cabin. Harold Winston, impeccably dressed and seemingly reasonable, arrived bearing an offer. "The company recognizes your valuable service to the community during this unfortunate illness," he began smoothly. We'd like to provide financial support for your continued medical work, say $500 initially. Clara studied him carefully. In exchange for a public statement acknowledging that the cause of the illness remains unknown and that your previous concerns about mining operations were premature. The amount he offered would fund her medical supplies for years, perhaps even a proper clinic. Before meeting Naheli's eyes across the room, Clara might have considered it, not for herself, but for what she could provide the community with such resources. "The cause is known, Mr. Winston," she replied firmly. "Your company is poisoning the water. No amount of money changes that truth." Winston's cordial facade cooled. "Miss Whitman, be reasonable. The mining company employs half this town. Accusations like yours could ruin many lives." "The contamination is already ruining lives," Naheli interjected. "Or do you not count Cherokee deaths in your calculations?" After Winston departed with thinly veiled threats, Clara and Naheli worked late preparing medicines. As they finished, their hands briefly touched across the table. Neither pulled away immediately, the simple contact carrying meaning beyond words. "In Cherokee tradition," Naheli said quietly, "healers often work as partners, their gifts balancing each other." "Is that what we are?" Clara asked. "Partners?" His eyes held hers steadily. "We could be more if circumstances were different." Before Clara could respond, Emma cried out from her sleeping area. They both rushed to the child, finding her caught in a nightmare but physically improved, her fever finally broken completely. As Clara soothed Emma back to sleep, she became aware of Naheli watching them, his expression unguarded. For a man who carefully maintained control as a tribal leader, this momentary vulnerability revealed depths of feeling he rarely displayed. Later, returning to their work, something had shifted between them. Words became unnecessary as they moved in synchrony, preparing medicines in comfortable silence. When Clara reached, "Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us." Now back to the story. For a jar on a high shelf, Naheli stepped behind her, his presence solid and warm as he helped her retrieve it. When she turned, they stood impossibly close, the professional boundaries they'd maintained dissolving in the intimacy of shared purpose and growing trust. "This is unwise," Clara whispered, though she made no move to step away. "Wisdom and necessity don't always align," he replied softly. The moment hung suspended between them, possibility breathed into existence against all social prohibitions. Then the cabin door burst open without warning. Dr. Hargrove stood framed in the doorway, his expression transforming from surprise to calculated triumph as he took in their proximity. "Well," he said with cold satisfaction, "this explains much about your sudden enthusiasm for savage remedies, Miss Whitman." Clara stepped away from Naheli, but not quickly enough to appear innocent. "Dr. Hargrove, the town council will be most interested to learn that our supposed nurse has not only embraced primitive superstition, but apparently primitive relationships as well." His eyes gleamed with malicious opportunity. "How do you imagine your patients will feel, knowing you've invited a Cherokee man to live in your home, that you've embraced not just his medicine, but him?" After Hargrove departed, Clara and Naheli faced each other in the sudden, heavy silence. "He'll use this against you," Naheli said quietly, "against your credibility." "Yes." Clara's response was simple, acknowledging the reality they faced. "I should leave." "No." The word emerged with surprising force. "That's what they want, to isolate us, to force us back into our separate worlds. I won't surrender to their prejudice." Naheli studied her face. "You understand what this means? They'll say, let them say what they will." Clara's years of careful isolation fell away in the face of this new certainty. We're stronger together. The medicine works better when we combine our knowledge. Emma needs both of us. And I—" She hesitated, then finished with quiet conviction. "I'm tired of denying half my heart to appease those who would never accept me regardless." In the soft lamplight of her cabin, with Emma sleeping peacefully nearby and the shadow of Hargrove's threats still hanging in the air, Clara and Nahele acknowledged the boundary they had crossed, and silently agreed they would not step back. Across it, the whispers began 3 days after Dr. Hargrove's discovery of Clara and Nahele in her cabin. At first, just rumors carried on concerned voices. Patients Clara had treated successfully were mysteriously relapsing despite her medicines. By week's end, 6 previously recovering patients had fallen ill again, their symptoms returning with greater severity. Fear spread faster than the fever itself. "She's poisoning them deliberately," Dr. Hargrove declared to a crowd gathered outside his office, "using Indian concoctions to first appear to cure, then create dependency. She's undermining proper medicine to advance her savage agenda." In her cabin, Clara examined a vial of her remedy with growing suspicion. The color seemed slightly off, the scent subtly altered. "Someone's tampered with this," she told Nahele. "The proportions are wrong." Before they could investigate further, Martha burst through the door, her practical demeanor shaken by urgency. "They're coming for you," she warned breathlessly. "Hargrove has convinced half the town you're poisoning people. Morrison from the mining company is fueling the fire, claiming you're trying to destroy the town's economy." She lowered her voice. "Mayor Fletcher is under pressure to have you arrested for public safety." Nahele moved protectively toward Clara. "We should leave and confirm their accusations." Clara shook her head. "I can't abandon my patients." "You can't help them from a jail cell either," Martha countered pragmatically. A messenger arrived from the Cherokee settlement, interrupting their debate. "Grandmother Wire has fallen ill," he reported grimly. "She asks for you, Neonoka's daughter." Clara felt torn between worlds as never before. Her patients in town needed her, yet the woman who held her mother's knowledge was critically ill. Before she could decide, Thomas appeared at her door, his expression grave. "The mining company has filed papers with territorial authorities," he reported. "They're seeking approval to relocate the Cherokee encampment for expanded operations. They claim the settlement contaminates the watershed, causing the illness." The calculated reversal of blame stunned them into momentary silence. Clara recovered first. "They're using the crisis they created to steal more Cherokee land," she realized aloud. "Using illness as a weapon, just as they've done before." "I need to return to the settlement," Nahele said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "My people need leadership now." "I'm coming with you," Clara decided. "Grandmother Wire needs treatment, and I need to gather untampered medicines." Emma, who had been listening silently, stepped forward. "I'm coming too." Clara knelt to the child's level. "Emma, it could be dangerous." The girl's chin lifted with newfound determination. "Those are my people too." Clara recognized in Emma's steady gaze something of her own journey, a child, finding strength at the crossroads of two worlds. She nodded once, accepting the girl's choice. Martha promised to mind Clara's cabin and continued distributing medicines to those who still trusted her. As they prepared to depart, she pulled Clara aside. "I'll search Hargrove's office," she whispered. "If he tampered with your medicines, there might be evidence." Clara embraced her friend. "Be careful. He's more dangerous than I realized." They left before dawn, taking forest paths to avoid confrontation. Halfway to the settlement, they heard voices on the main trail and concealed themselves in the underbrush. A group of miners passed, carrying surveying equipment and speaking openly of the planned clearing of the savages. Nahele's hand clenched into a fist, but he remained silent until they had passed. "This was always their intention," he said bitterly. The contamination may have been accidental at first, but now they use the crisis for their own benefit. They won't succeed, Clara assured him, though her confidence exceeded her certainty. The Cherokee settlement was in turmoil when they arrived. Word of the relocation plans had reached them, and opinions divided between resistance and pragmatic acceptance of yet another forced move. In Grandmother Wyer's dwelling, Clara found the elder weakened but alert, her piercing eyes still bright with intelligence despite her fever. "You came," Wyer observed in Cherokee as Clara examined her. "Of course." Clara prepared the remedies she had brought, untainted by Hargrove's interference. "The poison spreads in many forms," Wyer murmured as Clara worked. "In water, in hearts, in minds." Clara nodded grimly. "Dr. Hargrove has convinced many in town that I'm deliberately poisoning patients." "Because you threaten power," Wyer replied. "The healer who stands between worlds threatens those who profit from division." As Clara tended to Wyer, Nahele met with tribal elders regarding the relocation threat. Emma moved between both worlds, with newfound purpose, helping Clara prepare medicines while listening intently to the Cherokee discussions. By evening, Wyer showed improvement, though the fever persisted. Clara stepped outside for air and found Emma speaking with several Cherokee children, translating between those who spoke English and those who knew only their native tongue. The girl who had arrived traumatized and silent now stood as a bridge, using her dual heritage as strength rather than shame. A commotion at the settlement's edge drew Clara's attention. Thomas had returned from town with Martha, both looking grim but determined. "We found proof," Martha announced, holding up a small bottle. "Hargrove has been adding small amounts of mining waste to your remedies before distributing them to patients. Not enough to kill, but enough to ensure they'd relapse." Clara took the bottle, examining its contents with scientific detachment despite her internal fury. "He was willing to prolong suffering to discredit me." "It's worse," Thomas added. "I overheard Morrison and Hargrove planning. They've accelerated the contamination deliberately, increasing waste dumping in the Eastern Fork. They're creating a health crisis to justify removing the Cherokee." "We need to return to town with this evidence," Clara decided. Martha shook her head. "You can't. They've posted men watching for you. Mayor Fletcher is under immense pressure. Morrison's men control the town council now." "Then I'll go alone," Thomas volunteered. "I can move between worlds unseen when necessary." As they debated their next steps, a sentry reported riders approaching from town, a group of men led by Dr. Hargrove himself. "They claim to be a health inspection," the sentry reported, "authorized to assess the sanitary conditions of the settlement." Nahele's expression hardened. "They seek evidence to support their relocation plans, or to ensure Grandmother Wyer doesn't recover," Clara added, understanding the darker possibility. The settlement prepared to receive the unwelcome visitors, hiding their most vulnerable members and evidence of their advanced medical care. Clara remained in Wyer's dwelling, knowing her presence would only inflame the situation. As Hargrove's voice carried across the settlement, demanding access to the contamination source, Clara made her decision. "I need to return to town," she told Nahele quietly. "With evidence of both the water contamination and Hargrove's tampering, the truth must be proven publicly before they can implement their plans." Nahele studied her face in the fading light. "It's too dangerous. They'll arrest you the moment you appear. Then we'll need a different approach." Clara's mind raced through possibilities. "The town meeting tomorrow. Everyone will attend. If we can present irrefutable evidence there." "A public confrontation," Nahele nodded slowly, "with witnesses from both communities present." As night fell over the settlement, with Hargrove's group camped at its edge like predators waiting for weakness, Clara and Nahele outlined their dangerous plan, a final stand that would either bridge the divided communities or destroy them both. Dawn hadn't yet broken when Clara slipped into Pinewood Springs, her dark shawl pulled low over her face and her mother's woven Cherokee basket on her arm. The disguise of a tribal woman coming to sell wares, anonymous enough to pass unnoticed in the early morning shadows. Thomas had guided her through the forest to the town's edge before departing to gather more evidence from mining operations upstream. Nahele remained at the settlement, working to unify the Cherokee response to the relocation threat while continuing Grandmother Wire's treatment. Clara moved cautiously through back alleys toward her cabin, alert for any sign of watchers. She found her home ransacked, medicines broken on the floor, papers scattered, drawers upended in a search for incriminating evidence. Yet the intruders had missed her mother's loose floorboard beneath the bed, where Clara had hidden her most detailed records of water testing and patient treatments. She collected these vital documents, along with untainted medicine ingredients, from her root cellar, then slipped out to Martha's store through the connecting alley. Martha was already preparing for the day, her practical nature undiminished, despite the mounting tensions in town. She started at Clara's appearance. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered urgently, ushering Clara into the back room. "Hargrove has convinced the council to issue an order for your detention for public safety questioning. I need these medicines prepared for both communities," Clara explained, unpacking her basket. "And I need your help approaching potential allies before tomorrow's town meeting." Martha's eyes narrowed with strategic assessment. "I've been making a list. Families you've helped, people who've seen evidence of the mining contamination, business owners who've lost custom due to the illness." She produced a carefully annotated map of the town, with houses marked. "Judge Wilson has turned against Hargrove after his wife relapsed under the doctor's care. The Middleton family is furious about being lied to regarding the water." Clara studied Martha with newfound appreciation. "You've been organizing." "Someone needed to," Martha replied simply. "The town's dividing, but not all along the lines Hargrove and the mining company expected." As Martha spoke, her teenage son appeared in the doorway. "Mayor Fletcher is here to see you, Ma." Martha and Clara exchanged alarmed glances before Martha nodded. "Send him back." Samuel Fletcher entered the storeroom, his political mask, slipping momentarily into surprise at Clara's presence. "Miss Whitman, I should report you immediately." "But you won't," Martha stated firmly, "not after what I've shown you." Fletcher's carefully maintained facade cracked further. "The evidence is troubling, but circumstantial. The mining company provides poison," Clara interrupted, "and Hargrove has been ensuring patients relapse by tampering with treatments." She placed her documentation on the table. "These are water tests from multiple sources, showing higher contamination levels exactly where the mining waste enters the watershed." Fletcher examined the papers, his political calculation visibly warring with conscience. "This still doesn't prove deliberate action." "This does." Martha produced the vial Thomas had found in Hargrove's office. "Mining waste being added to medicines. Dr. Hargrove's assistant confirmed it this morning. The boy has a conscience, even if his employer doesn't." Fletcher sat heavily on a nearby crate. "What do you propose?" "Morrison controls most of the council. The mining company threatens to leave town entirely if operations are restricted, taking jobs and tax revenue with them." "They're bluffing," Clara said confidently. "The minerals they're extracting are too valuable to abandon. They'll accept reasonable restrictions rather than lose their investment." A quiet knock interrupted them. Martha opened the back door to reveal Dr. Hargrove's young assistant, James Parker, looking nervous but determined. "Dr. Hargrove has been falsifying diagnoses," he reported without preamble, "attributing deaths from the contamination to other causes. marking Cherokee-treated patients as complications of primitive medicine, regardless of their actual condition. Clara had suspected as much, but still felt anger flare at the confirmation. "Will you testify to this publicly?" The young man hesitated before nodding. "I became a doctor to heal, not harm." With Parker's departure, Fletcher finally appeared to reach a decision. The town meeting tomorrow was called to approve the Cherokee relocation. Morrison plans to blame them entirely for the illness. He met Clara's eyes directly. "I can delay proceedings, create an opportunity for your evidence to be presented, but the council vote is still likely against you." "We'll need to convince the townspeople first," Clara acknowledged. "The council follows public sentiment when it's strong enough." As Fletcher left through the back door, Emma slipped in from the street entrance where she'd been keeping watch. The girl had insisted on coming with Clara despite the danger. "People are gathering at the church," she reported, talking about the sickness. Clara recognized an opportunity. Taking Emma's hand, she approached the church by a roundabout path, listening to the concerned voices of townspeople discussing the ongoing crisis. When she finally stepped inside, a momentary hush fell over the crowd. "My patients are dying because of lies," Clara stated into the silence. "Not from Cherokee medicine, but from poisoned water and a doctor who places pride above healing." Several moved to confront her, but Judge Wilson raised his hand. "Let her speak. My wife improves under her care and worsens under Hargrove's. I want to hear her evidence." For the next hour, Clara presented her findings: the water tests, the pattern of illness following the mining contamination, the suspicious relapses. She concluded by having Emma step forward. "This child lost her parents to the same illness affecting your families," Clara explained. "Cherokee or white, the poison doesn't discriminate. Our shared water connects us all, in sickness and potentially in healing." Emma, who had rehearsed her words carefully, spoke with clear-eyed innocence. "Clara helps everyone who's sick, no matter if they're mean to her. She says medicine shouldn't see differences between people, only what they need." The simple truth, from a child's lips, reached hearts that might have remained closed to adult reasoning. By the time Clara and Emma slipped away, a core group of townspeople had committed to supporting her at the town meeting. As dusk approached, they reunited, with Thomas at the agreed meeting point outside town. His news confirmed their worst fears. "The mining company plans to divert the entire river," he reported. "The current contamination is nothing compared to what will happen. Both communities will lose their water source." "We need to get this information to Nahaley," Clara decided. They traveled back to the Cherokee settlement under cover of darkness. Clara found Nahaley emerging from a council meeting, his face drawn with the strain of maintaining unity among his people. "Some want to burn the mining equipment," he told Clara quietly. "Others wish to simply leave, continuing the pattern of retreat that has defined our history. Neither path leads to long-term survival." "We have allies in town now," Clara assured him, "and evidence of the broader threat to both communities." Grandmother Wire, recovered enough to sit outside her dwelling, overheard their conversation. "Bring your allies here," she suggested. "Let them see with their own eyes what you defend." The elder's simple suggestion blossomed into a plan. That night, as Grandmother Wire conducted a ceremony to unite the divided tribal factions, Clara sent messages to their town supporters, inviting them to visit the settlement before the crucial town meeting. In the flickering firelight, Clara and Nahaley found a moment alone. "If we fail tomorrow," Clara said softly, "both our worlds will suffer. Then we won't fail." Nahaley took her hand, their fingers intertwining. "You've taught me that standing between worlds isn't weakness but strength. Your vision includes both sides of the river." "As does yours," Clara acknowledged. "Perhaps that's why we found each other, to build a bridge where others see only division. The fire's warm light illuminated their joined hands, his broader, darker palm supporting her paler fingers, a visual representation of their shared purpose and deepening connection. Beyond them, Cherokee elders continued their ceremony while, in town, Martha and their allies prepared for the confrontation ahead. The divided waters would soon converge into a single powerful current, one that could either sweep away the corruption poisoning both communities or drown their hopes in the flood of prejudice and greed. The town hall overflowed with people, their faces reflecting the divided sentiments of Pinewood Springs. Mining company supporters clustered near the front, where Edward Morrison and his associates sat with confident expressions. Dr. Hargrove paced near them, his usual composure noticeably frayed. Those who had benefited from Clara's treatments gathered on the opposite side, with Martha Caldwell standing resolutely among them. Mayor Fletcher called the meeting to order, his political demeanor firmly in place, though his eyes betrayed inner conflict. "We face a critical decision regarding the Cherokee settlement and the ongoing health crisis," he began formally. "Mr. Morrison will present the mining company's proposal for resolving these issues." Morrison stepped forward, his expensive suit and confident stance designed to convey authority. "Fellow citizens, the mining company has identified the source of our troubles." He gestured toward a map showing the Cherokee settlement. "The primitive conditions and unregulated activities upstream have contaminated the watershed. Our proposal is simple. Relocate the Cherokee settlement away from the water source, allowing us to properly manage the river for everyone's benefit." Murmurs rippled through the crowd as Morrison continued, outlining economic benefits and promised health improvements. Clara waited at the back, Nahaley beside her, until Fletcher nodded slightly in their direction. "Before we vote," Fletcher announced, "Miss Whitman has requested an opportunity to present alternative findings." Clara walked forward, conscious of the divided town watching her every move. Unlike Morrison's polished appearance, she had chosen to wear neither purely Western clothes nor Cherokee garments, but elements of both, a visible representation of her dual heritage and perspective. The illness affecting both communities stems from mining waste, combining with disturbed limestone deposits, Clara stated clearly, placing her documentation and water samples on the council table. These scientific tests show conclusively that contamination increases directly below mining operations, not the Cherokee settlement. Dr. Hargrove immediately rose. "Miss Whitman has no scientific credentials. Her primitive remedies have caused relapses among my patients. She's simply defending her mother's people at our expense." "That's false," came a quiet voice from the side. James Parker, Hargrove's assistant, stepped forward. The young man trembled slightly but continued with growing confidence. "Dr. Hargrove has been deliberately sabotaging Miss Whitman's treatments, adding mining waste to cause relapses. I've witnessed it myself." Shock rippled through the room. Hargrove's face contorted with rage. "Preposterous! The boy is confused." "These are Dr. Hargrove's own treatment records," Parker continued, placing documents on the table. "He's been falsifying causes of death, hiding the pattern of mining contamination while discrediting Cherokee medicine." Morrison stepped forward, his confident facade unshaken. "Even if some contamination exists, which we don't concede, the economic reality remains. This town exists because of the mine. Restrict our operations and we'll be forced to close. Completely. Hundreds of jobs lost. Businesses ruined." His threat hung in the air as townspeople exchanged concerned glances. Clara recognized the moment of uncertainty and pressed forward. "The contamination threatens both communities equally," she explained, her voice carrying the dual authority of scientific training and traditional knowledge. But there is a solution that serves everyone." Thomas unrolled detailed maps on the council table. The mine can redirect its operations away from limestone deposits and implement proper waste management. The cost is significant, but far less than building a new mine elsewhere. Absurd, Morrison scoffed. The company would never. The company will, interrupted a new voice. A well-dressed man Clara didn't recognize stepped forward from the back. Jeremiah Collins, Regional Director of Mining Operations. The board sent me to investigate why a profitable mine is suddenly losing workers to illness and facing potential closure. Morrison's confident expression faltered as Collins continued. Head office doesn't appreciate local management creating health crises that threaten our broader operations. Proper waste management should have been implemented years ago. As this unexpected alliance shifted the room's momentum, the town hall doors opened. Grandmother Wire entered, supported by several Cherokee elders, their unprecedented presence in a town meeting creating immediate silence. The water knows no boundaries between peoples, Wire stated simply in accented but clear English. Neither should its healing. Tension vibrated through the room as these worlds collided. Morrison, sensing his position weakening, turned to inflame old prejudices. Are we to allow savages to dictate how we manage our town? Will you surrender to primitive superstition over progress? Before anyone could respond, Emma slipped from Clara's side and walked to the center of the room. Her small form commanded attention as she faced the crowded hall without fear. My parents died because the water was poisoned, she stated, her voice clear despite her youth. They weren't savages. They were people who got sick from the same thing making your children sick. The room grew completely still as Emma continued, her simple words cutting through politics to human truth. Clara helped me when no one else would. She doesn't care if someone is Cherokee or white, she just helps them. She taught me that's what medicine is supposed to do. Emma looked directly at Morrison. Why would you keep hurting people just to be right? In the profound silence that followed, Mayor Fletcher stepped forward, his political calculation visibly giving way to moral conviction. I propose we form a joint committee of town representatives and Cherokee leaders to oversee water management, he announced firmly. The mining company will implement proper waste controls immediately, with costs shared between the company and the town. Morrison began to protest, but Collins cut him off. The company agrees to these terms. Mr. Morrison is no longer authorized to speak on our behalf. As the meeting shifted toward practical details of implementing the solution, Dr. Hargrove, watching his influence and reputation crumble, lunged suddenly toward Clara. "Witch, you've ruined everything!" he shouted, his face contorted with rage. Naheli moved to intercept him, but was blocked by the crowd. Instead, it was Judge Wilson who caught Hargrove's arm, restraining him with unexpected strength. "That's enough, Doctor," Wilson stated firmly. "My wife lives because of Miss Whitman's treatments. Your deception ends here." As Hargrove was led away, the meeting turned to creating the joint committee. Clara found herself nominated to serve as head medical advisor, a position that would require her to work formally with both communities. The path forward isn't simple, Clara cautioned as people discussed implementation details. We'll need to blend modern techniques with traditional knowledge, just as we've done with the treatments. Nahele stepped forward to stand beside her. Our communities have existed separately but suffered together. Perhaps now we can heal together as well. As the meeting concluded with tentative hope replacing the fear that had gripped the town for weeks, Clara felt the weight of isolation lifting. The boundaries between worlds remained, but now they were becoming bridges rather than barriers. Grandmother Wire approached Clara as people dispersed, her wise eyes seeing beyond the immediate victory. "The hardest healing comes next," she murmured. "When crisis fades, old habits often return." Clara nodded in understanding. The water crisis had been resolved, but the deeper currents of prejudice and separation would require ongoing attention. Yet for the first time, she could envision a future where standing between worlds was recognized as strength rather than weakness. Emma slipped her small hand into Clara's as they left the town hall. "Are we going home now?" she asked simply. The question carried layers of meaning Clara wasn't yet ready to fully address. Home, family, belonging. The path ahead would require personal choices as challenging as any they had faced during the crisis. "Yes," she answered softly. "We're going home." The weeks following the town meeting brought gradual healing to both communities. The mining company, under Collins' new management, began implementing the required changes to waste disposal systems and redirecting operations away from the critical limestone deposits. Daily water testing showed slowly improving quality as the contamination diminished. Clara established her practice in a small building between her cabin and the town center, symbolically positioning herself, as she had always been, at the intersection of two worlds. Here, she treated the remaining illness cases with her integrated approach, while beginning to train others in both traditional and Western medical techniques. "Hold the needle like this," she instructed young Sarah Wilson, the judge's daughter, who had asked to become Clara's first apprentice. Nearby, a Cherokee girl named Adahi watched carefully. The plant infusion must be administered precisely to be effective. These training sessions grew to include interested students from both communities, a tentative but promising beginning. Martha often observed with undisguised satisfaction. "You've created something entirely new," she noted one afternoon as the students departed. "Not Cherokee medicine, not purely Western either." "Medicine shouldn't have boundaries," Clara replied. "Simply, healing comes from knowledge, regardless of its source." Dr. Hargrove had departed Pinewood Springs shortly after the confrontation, his reputation and practice destroyed by the revelation of his deceptions. His assistant, James Parker, remained, working humbly under Clara's guidance to rebuild trust with the community. One crisp autumn morning, Clara stood before Judge Wilson in his chambers, Emma's small hand clasped tightly in hers. Thomas and Martha waited as witnesses as Wilson signed the formal adoption papers. "Emma Whitman," the judge pronounced with unusual warmth, "legally recognized as your daughter." He leaned down to address Emma directly. "You have a fine mother, young lady." Emma nodded solemnly. "I have two mothers now. One watches from the spirit world, and one holds my hand here." The simple wisdom in the child's words touched Clara deeply. Later that day, as they walked home together, Emma skipping ahead to examine interesting plants along the path, Clara reflected on how completely this quiet child had transformed her life. "She has your gift for seeing beneath the surface," Nahaley observed, joining them on the path from the direction of the settlement. He had been dividing his time between tribal leadership duties and assisting with Clara's broader healing work. "She's teaching me as much as I teach her," Clara admitted, "especially about belonging." Nahaley nodded, watching Emma with affection. "Speaking of belonging," he hesitated, uncharacteristically uncertain. "Walk with me to the river?" At the place where the two branches of the river joined, one flowing from the town's direction, one from the Cherokee settlement, Nahaley stopped. The symbolism of the location wasn't lost on Clara. "Our people have a tradition," he began carefully. "When a leader takes a partner, they exchange gifts representing their commitment to sustaining the community together." From his pocket, he withdrew a beautifully crafted silver band, engraved with both Cherokee symbols and Western patterns intertwined. This isn't purely traditional, he acknowledged. Like us, it brings together different worlds. Clara stared at the ring, understanding the profound significance of what he proposed. The tribe would accept this, a half-white woman as their leader's wife. Some will struggle, Nahele admitted honestly, as will some townspeople, but we stand at a rare moment where change is possible. Our union could help cement the new understanding between our communities. Clara looked toward Emma, who watched them from a respectful distance with the intuitive understanding of a child who had experienced both profound loss and unexpected connection. "I need time," Clara said softly. "There's something I must do." First, the following morning, Clara journeyed with Grandmother Wire to her mother's grave in a small clearing on Cherokee land. Clara had visited rarely over the years, caught between worlds and uncertain of her place in either. "I avoided coming here," Clara confessed as they stood before the simple marker. "It meant confronting the parts of myself I couldn't reconcile." Wire nodded in understanding. "Your mother faced the same struggle. She told me once that loving your father taught her that the heart doesn't recognize boundaries created by men. Yet those boundaries have shaped my entire life," Clara responded. "Until now," Wire observed. "Now you reshape them, not just for yourself, but for others." Clara knelt by her mother's grave, placing a bundle containing both medicinal herbs and flowers from her garden, Cherokee tradition and Western custom, combined in a single offering. "I understand now, Mother," she whispered. "Standing between worlds isn't a wound to be healed, but a gift to be shared." When Clara returned from her journey, she found Nahele waiting. Her answer required no words, only the simple act of extending her hand to receive the ring he offered. Their union ceremony took place where the rivers joined, with representatives from both communities gathering to witness this unprecedented connection. Mayor Fletcher, acting in his official capacity, performed the legal marriage according to territorial law, while Grandmother Wire conducted traditional Cherokee blessing rituals. Emma stood proudly between them, her small face solemn with the importance of the moment as she handed them each ceremonial gifts, Clara's medicine pouch to Nahele and his carved eagle feather to Clara. "Two streams joining make a stronger river," Wire proclaimed, her voice carrying surprising strength across the gathered witnesses. "Two traditions joining make stronger medicine." As autumn deepened toward winter, Clara and Nahele established their home on the boundary land between town and settlement, not as a compromise, but as a deliberate claiming of the in-between space that had once represented Clara's isolation, but now symbolized connection. Thomas found his role expanding as official interpreter and cultural liaison for the Joint Water Management Committee. Martha and Mayor Fletcher were often seen in deep conversation beyond their civic duties, their unlikely friendship blossoming toward something more personal. 1 year after the crisis began, Clara stood in the doorway of her new clinic, watching. A diverse group of students, Cherokee and white, male and female, gathering medicinal plants under Emma's surprisingly confident direction. "Yarrow stops bleeding," Emma explained seriously to a younger child, "but you must thank the plant before taking it, or the medicine won't work properly." Nahele joined Clara in the doorway, following her gaze. "The future," he observed quietly. "A different future than either of us imagined," Clara agreed, leaning slightly against his steady presence. "Not different," he corrected gently. "Expanded, to include possibilities beyond what either world thought possible alone." As Emma led her small group of followers toward them, her face bright with purpose and belonging, Clara felt the last fragments of her divided self finally reconcile. The painful limbo of her childhood had transformed into a unique vantage point, one that allowed her to build bridges where others saw only chasms. The medicine of the heart had healed not just the communities but Clara herself, teaching her That strength often comes from standing in the spaces between, where rivers meet, where cultures touch, where healing truly begins. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.